What's up, you guys? It's FeedyX. One quick note, if you don't want to listen to the entire interview, to be honest, it does drag a bit towards the middle. The one section that you should definitely click to the timestamp below on is this one. Sold well to mixed reviews, trial and error throughout the 30-year history of the Tekken series. I think this section in the interview is one of the most insightful and humanizing sections of this interview. So definitely check this part out if you don't want to watch the whole interview. Timestamps below. The Tekken team have put out a new interview, and it's really, really cool. It's not just about Tekken 8. It's about game development, sales, appealing to players, appealing to shareholders. I think it offers a lot of insight into what goes into not only making Tekken 8, but also the Tekkens before. I think it shares a lot of insight that many people have been curious about for a long time. All we've done is speculate. So it's a decently long interview. I figured I'd read it for you guys and put up some gameplay down here while you sit back and enjoy. All right. Katsuhiro Harada and Kohei Ikeda talk Tekken, behind the scenes on developing Tekken 8 and the mindset needed of a developer, part 1. More than a year has passed since the release of 3D fighting game Tekken 8, released on January 2024. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Tekken series, we interviewed series executive game director and chief producer, Harada, and Tekken 7/8 game director and development producer, Kohei Ikeda. Harada has been involved with the series since the first entry in 1994, and Ikeda is a Tekken player turned developer. We asked what they learned from developing Tekken 8 about the culture of proactiveness in the TEKKEN Project and the mindset needed of a game developer. I think that there's two parts, and part 1 and part 2 both have like really cool things in it from when I skimmed it. So, first question. I have a ton of questions about Tekken 8 and the series in general. What are your thoughts looking back on Tekken 8 first year post-launch? Harada says, for previous games in the series, we would release for arcades first, add content, and then make a home console port afterwards. But for Tekken 8, we decided to start with a worldwide simultaneous release on consoles and PC. That difference alone meant the feedback we got the past year was unlike anything we had before. Ikeda says, we needed to think about how we would change things for Tekken 8, as Tekken 7 managed to sell 12 million copies. There was a need for us to design the game to satisfy the whole range of players, from casual to professional. How does not releasing an arcade version affect development? Second question. It took us about 3 years to port previous Tekken games from arcade to consoles, so we needed to make the same amount of content from the very beginning. I didn't know it took 3 years. I thought it was like a 1-year thing, but I'm guessing they would start work early, do a console release during development, and then continue the obviously continue the development. So it sounds kind of obvious. I didn't know it was a 3-year endeavor. Harada says it also changed how our budget was spent. Before, we spent our development in stages. We would, I think phases is what he means, not like, you know, in the stage, the fighting stage. We would start with arcade versions in Japan and Asia, then the console version. But this time, we started with a worldwide multi-platform release. The difference was so stark that some people at the company were surprised at the amount we needed to develop the game. Amount of money, I believe. Did it cost more than the total amount spent developing Tekken 7? Harada says the arcade version of Tekken 7 cost about 10% of Tekken 8. That is insane. I did not know that. We knew that games were more expensive to develop, but I never imagined it would be this different. Ikeda and the team did their best developing the game. I can't praise them enough. 10%. So like what? That's insane. Before, both development time and budget were planned sequentially, but you had to do all of that in one go. That's a big change. All right. Culture of proactiveness. Tekken team members learning martial arts for their fighting game. Tekken 8 underwent a change in business model with its simultaneous worldwide multi-platform release. That's a lot of words. What other changes were there? Harada says the number of younger players has grown significantly. It just goes to show that your customer base changes when you change your business model and sales method. And this is true. A lot of the new NA players who are like doing really well in tournaments are pretty young. And we're pretty surprised that like there are Zoomers who are coming into Tekken and are cooking people. It's really cool. What's the majority age for Tekken players right now? Around 25 or 26, says Harada. It's similar to other fighting games, but one of the big successes of the Tekken series is that there's a generational transition every 3 games or so. Older players knew about me and Ikeda, and they would come and talk to us when we were at tournaments or at the airport. That's not the case for newer players, but that's also a good thing in a way. I think it's true. I had not heard of Ikeda until Tekken 8. And people around the internet obviously love like saying he doesn't know what he's doing or things like that, but he comes from playing the game. He's a developer who was onboarded from the community. Nakatsu was his gamer tag. So this is cool to see. How about the developers on the Tekken project? We had younger members, Ikeda says, we had younger members join the team, and they're pretty passionate when it comes to playing the game they developed, Tekken 8. They would play during lunch, and we sneaked 7 teams into the Tekken Master Cup, a 5-man team tournament. I didn't know they had 7 teams. I thought they just had the dev team with Ikeda, Michael Murray, Harada, Markman, and Tanukana. So I saw that team play, but I didn't know they had 6 other teams. That's pretty cool. Successfully introducing a new generation to the series is key for any long-lasting IP, and it's a topic we could easily spend hours discussing. Is the Tekken Project's team culture the reason why the developers are so passionate? Harada says, we have all kinds of passionate developers. Some are passionate about game development, others about martial arts. Members aren't strictly assigned to a particular role, and they're allowed to work on the tasks that appeal to them. Interviewer says, I thought that everyone had predefined roles when working on a big project. Is that not how the Tekken Project operates? The Tekken Project is comprised of people who can independently look at something, think about it, and make decisions by themselves. I also used to go beyond my capacity as a director or planner and would work on pixel art for UI, game art, music, and even direct motion capture. But people on other projects would be afraid of us because we work so differently. Ikeda says, when I was on the Soul Calibur team, I once asked somebody from the Tekken Project about tuning attacks to feel more visceral. My team, worried about me, asked how it went when I came back. I guess just the culture difference is why people were afraid of the Tekken Project. That's interesting. It must be reassuring to have so many people who are proactive in their work. Harada says, there was something called the will mindset at Namco. It's a mindset where if you want to do something, you take it upon yourself to do it. For example, I did something akin to leading the development team for Tekken Tag Tournament 2. But strictly speaking, I was not in charge of Tekken at the time, and the game's financial performance had zero effect on my position at the company. But nobody on the Tekken project saw what I did as stepping out of line. Okay, so Harada was not in charge of Tekken, but took it upon himself to lead Tekken Tag 2. So the fact that the game did poorly didn't affect him, and the Tekken project respected him at the same time. That is pretty cool. That's because the Tekken project has a culture of doing what motivates you. Do you choose people who are highly proactive to join the team? Harada says, everyone on the team likes Tekken, so they come to us on their own initiative, regardless of the discipline they're assigned to. There are some people I headhunted from arcades, and they're still working with us on Tekken. Ikeda says some members even go to dojos for karate, Wing Chun, or Taido, so they can try various martial arts to make a better game. I can almost feel some of the moves in Tekken when they land. I see now that it's a result of the developers being proactive in their work. How is talent assigned across the project? Most of them work on whatever they're good at. Even if you say someone is an animator, there's a plethora of things we need, like body animations, facial animations, other behavior, and more. So people just pick what they're good at. The team is full of people like this, so it balances out when you look at the Tekken Project team as a whole. Harada says, out of all the projects here, the Tekken Project probably best demonstrates that you get good at what you like doing. That checks out. That checks out too if you're a player of the game, right? Like, it's obviously like people respect like getting good at the game, but everybody who's good at the game likes it. You know, it's really hard to force it if you don't personally enjoy it. Releasing what you made into the world, being motivated to be proactive. Some may say that when you choose a job you love, you'll have a hard time handling the differences in expectations and reality. In the case of the Tekken Project, members are probably happy that they get to work on Tekken, as it's a game they like to play, but you're faced with the reality of deadlines and quality standards. Harada says, my parents told me the same thing when I told them I got a job as a game developer. But in the game industry, no matter how tough development is, you'll eventually finish and release the game. That's why if you like something, you can keep going even if the going's tough. Ikeda says, for a fighting game, you can go to in-person events and see people play what you've made, so that's another source of motivation. There aren't many jobs where you can see the results of what you made as much as game development. True. What kind of people would fit in on the Tekken Project? Harada says, people who are proactive and driven when it comes to things they're interested in. It'd also be nice if the person feels fulfilled from having other people play their game, and has an interest in the players in their community. I say this because these traits are often missing in games where the team gives up halfway through development or the final product doesn't turn out well. I think knowledge about game development surprisingly doesn't matter as much as the mindset. Ikeda-san, you changed careers from working in games media to being a game developer with zero developer experience. Was the transition difficult? Ikeda says, I didn't have any development experience and I wasn't a new graduate hire, so there was nobody to teach me, and he laughs. I was frustrated at myself because everyone could do all kinds of things, but there were tons of nice people in both the Soul Calibur and Tekken teams. So I improved by studying game development alone while asking people around me when there was something I didn't understand. Harada says, in my case, I started during the era of the first PlayStation, where we started being able to make games using 3D polygons, so everyone was learning from scratch. Game development was also on a smaller scale back then, so you knew what everyone was doing. Would you say that game development was better back then? Not really, says Harada. Now we have the internet so people can learn from watching videos of other people making games, and we have instant access to free development tools. What's more important is that the company is matured, so we have proper training programs as well. All right, so I think the second half of this interview is a bit drier for me, just talking about like who would fit on the TEKKEN Project team. I think it's cool that everybody's self-driven. I think that's really important as well. But to me, the interesting part is what they start to cover in part 2. If you jumped here by the timestamp to part 2, I think this is where a lot of really cool details come out about the development cycle. The interviewer says the topics will be the mindset a game developer needs, how game developers work, and trial and error. This is the interesting part. The trial and error throughout Tekken's 30-year history. All right. Preparing to be a game developer. Communicate with schoolmates who have different values. Many people make indie games nowadays. Is it a good idea to experience indie development before working for a game company? Harada says, I think it's a wonderful idea. It's nice to gather 10 or so friends to have healthy discussions with while working together. You don't have to finish the game. It's enough to just reach a state where people can give you feedback. Is that so you can get a head start on learning about game development? What's more important is the experience of working in a team with people from different disciplines. So school club activities are a good place for producers, directors, planners, people like me who come from a literature or arts background. It's also good to do what Ikeda did. Create a community at the arcade, regularly participate in events and other activities outside of school that give you opportunities to meet different people. What important lessons can a game developer learn from group activities? Rada says it teaches you how to communicate with people who think differently from you. Game development involves people from all disciplines, not only sciences and not only arts. You will need to ask people like artists and musicians to help make the game. For example, if someone who doesn't know how to draw talks to an artist, it's very possible they won't see eye to eye. In this situation, you need the communication skills to express your vision, befriend others, and ask them to do things for you. The company won't teach us these things, so you have to interact with a bunch of different people while you're still at school. So experiences unrelated to game development are useful when working for a game company. Ikeda says, I was in the soccer club at school, but when I was at the arcade, I would talk to kids from different schools and even strangers I didn't know. Is this him as a kid? Can we find him? Maybe this is just a generic soccer picture. I had a job, Ikeda, in visual media direction after I finished school. So I spent 7 or 8 years making monthly content in teams with assistant directors and actors. I'm sure that my experience making things in a team has helped me develop games. There are tons of communication techniques people use. So is it important to use these techniques when talking to someone with different values? I feel like the answer is obviously yes. Let's be real. Harada says, I think it's more important to be interested in the person and try to figure out what's important to them. When you're at school, you get to be with all kinds of people, so it's the perfect place to have these experiences. I was in the Boy Scouts and did sports in school, so I got to meet people from all backgrounds. Okay. That's why I have no trouble talking about anything from budgets with company executives to scouting players at the arcades. Is that because you were able to figure out what was important to these people? I'm not an audio person, but the people on the sound team had no problems with giving me direction on music used in the TEKKEN Project. It's because I could persuade them through communication. I identified the strengths of each person, so when I talked to them, I could get them on my side by saying, this is what you're good at, this is what people are looking for right now, so if you make music in this way, it should go well. Now, this is fascinating because I've been on the record saying I feel like TEKKEN music is still great, but has gone lower in quality and consistency compared to older entries. I wonder if that's just because Harada is not as directly involved in directing the music teams, or if it's the music teams evolving as well, or different staff. It's hard to say, right? But I didn't know he was so directly involved. So before we get into a debate about the music, okay, I have a video on that. All right, music taste is subjective, but I personally feel that there is a quality gap in terms of the depth and the attention to detail and experience. I think that quality is more objective. The taste and the enjoyment is subjective, of course. But I think that there is an element of quality that I discuss in depth again in a different video. When did you start trying to persuade people who think differently from you? Harada says, when I was still in school. And it's important to be interested in the person you're trying to convince. It's very important. That's why I can't convince you guys, chat, is... I'm kidding. Ikeda says, you can only do so much by yourself. Cooperation between many people is needed to make a good game. I think it's important to know and communicate with people from the perspective of refining ideas by considering the opinions of others as well. Ikeda likes watching movies, but he doesn't just look at what's shown on screen, he also considers other information like who the director is and their mindset. So he's naturally geared to not just look at the final product, but also show interest in who on the team did what. It's having an interest in people changes how you see things. Harada says, it's our job to show interest in people, discover their strengths, and link them to each other. These are important skills for people from an arts background who want to make games but can't program or draw. Working to make players, shareholders, and developers happy. What's important to keep in mind when working as a game developer? Harada says, I always tell the people who work under me to balance the satisfaction of players, shareholders, and themselves, since we have to make all three of them happy. This is where the good stuff is, I think. I'm sure everybody wants to hear about this part. Okay? Some say that developers should just work harder, but you won't get to make your next game if you work too hard and run out of steam. Some people say that you should devote yourselves to the craft and do whatever it takes. Are you saying that's not the case? Harada says, when I was young, I said that you should keep going until you drop. And I even slept overnight at the studio for about 2 months once. I believed that I contributed to the world and made the game better by sacrificing my health. But I was only able to do that because I was young back then. The reality is that with age, even veteran developers start experiencing mental health issues. That's when I realized it would be a loss to everyone if the people who brought the creation into the world were unhappy. There's no point unless everyone's happy. And it's even worse when one person bears more of the burden than everyone else. Things were less clear-cut when I realized that. The amount of content going into a game has grown significantly compared to games in the past. Some people say you can use AI to speed things up, but the human touch is actually something really important to this industry. Our current problem is how to balance the two. I think it's insane when anybody accuses Harada of not working hard. There's stories of him like losing hair during Tekken 4. Again, 2 months sleeping in the studio. The human touch is so important. There's such an AI push these days, and I think the human touch in any creative endeavor is irreplaceable for any kind of creative endeavor. So that's my piece on that. And this is another big one. So if you're jumping here by the timestamp, this is probably what you've been looking for. Sold well to mixed reviews. Trial and error throughout the 30-year history of the Tekken series. It feels like as game development gets bigger in scale, it also becomes more difficult to steer the game in a particular direction. Hardcore, casual, and all players in between have to like the game. We now have access to player comments on social media. How do you navigate the current landscape? Harada says, that's a tough question. Things that sell have their fair share of lovers and haters. Hardcore players will rave over something they like, but when they say something negative, the message has great reach. Casual players, on the other hand, won't even post on social media even if they like something. That's why it's possible for a game to sell well even if the reviews are mixed. So mixed isn't always a bad thing. Are there examples where only the hardcore players were positive about a game? Ikeda chimes in, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 would be an example of that. Hardcore players really liked the depth that came from being able to control 2 different characters, but the feedback from non-hardcore players was not favorable. It was the first Tekken game I worked on, Ikeda, and I played the game before that non-stop. So I was really motivated to make Tag 2 a good game. He said play the game before that. So did he come maybe on board in the middle of Tekken Tag 2? Maybe after arcade release? That one, I wonder what his real background is there. Maybe he meant played Tekken in general. Maybe he just meant he played Tekken like 6, 5DR, and Tag 1, Tekken 4, and then came on for Tag 2. That's probably what that means. Played the Tekken game. The series. So with that mindset, I asked for ideas from the team and incorporated the concept of having exciting battles by having control over 2 characters. We even made a mechanic that let players do air combos while switching characters, which needed complex execution. You thought that more depth would make fans happier. Ikeda said arcade income on release day was great, but it started going down from day 2 and it had halved by day 4. Even internally, there were fewer and fewer people playing the game during lunch. When I asked why, many of them said that they couldn't control 2 characters. For a long time, the Tekken series has had compatible characters, or characters that had similar moves and controls like Nina and Anna. But by the time we were making Tekken Tag 2, the characters had become more unique and there were less similarities. Yes, I remember using King and his compatible character, Armor King. The two characters shared many commonalities in how they played and controlled, and it made me more confident in playing. Ikeda said, it made me realize that I wasn't looking at the big picture. There aren't many players in the world like me who can execute complex controls. Worded differently, Tekken sells millions of copies because it's accessible to non-hardcore players as well. There were other examples of this. I started working on Tekken after Tekken 6, and when a senior developer asked me what the series needed, I told him a fleshed out practice mode, because I was thinking from my hardcore player perspective. But when we looked at the post-release questionnaires, many people praised the scenario campaign mode, or the amount of content in the game, but nobody wrote anything about the practice mode. That's why I decided to learn more about our players before starting development on Tekken 7 and Tekken 8. You can see this development philosophy from Nakatsu in Tekken 8. And this is like, when people accuse me of like shilling for the company, I really think I just appreciate Nakatsu's care for the hardcore audience, the way that he's enhanced the practice mode over and over. Sure, you can make arguments about how it's behind other fighting games, but the fact is Tekken straight up didn't invest in the practice mode very much. It's gotten a little better each game, but Tekken 8 is the first time they've really invested development time into it, and you can see it. So I feel like it's really cool that Nakatsu got to elaborate on it here, because he clearly cares about the hardcore audience, despite the fact that surveys favored the single-player modes. Harada says, we managed to sell 12 million copies with Tekken 7, so I'm sure the knowledge helped convince everyone to come play Tekken 7 after Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Did you have these issues with other entries in the series as well? Tekken 4 was the opposite of Ikeda's example, Tekken Tag 2, where the game sold well but reviewed the worst in the series. The Tekken games before it sold very well, and the experience led to some misguided wisdom. We thought that if we could tangibly describe why Tekken was selling, we could feed that back into adjusting the game's concept and make something even better. So we conducted a survey for arcade owners, players, and everyone in between, resulting in a big table containing data like character usage rates. From this data, we discovered that people thought Tekken had too many characters, and there were too many moves to memorize. The effects were too bright and it was hard to see, and Tekken games are always the same and never try to innovate. Based on that, we shrunk the roster, simplified the effects, and changed the game mechanics for Tekken 4. But that took away everything that made Tekken a good game. Income at the arcades went down, but arcades were still buying the board since people liked the series up till then, and that meant higher revenue for the studio. I also stopped playing Tekken 4, said Ikeda. It just didn't feel like Tekken to me. I would think fixing the bad things would improve the game, but it seems that actually wasn't the case. Harada says, I consider it, Tekken 4, our biggest failure because it damaged the reputation we had built for the series. Was it wrong to consciously try to gain wisdom into the game or try to improve the game? Harada says, there's nothing wrong with trying to gain insight, but the problem was that I was so pressured to do better on our own, even though at the time everyone just wanted us to make something that stayed true to what Tekken was. By nature, people don't really look for positive feedback. That's why for Tekken 4, I thought it was wise for us to ask about what was wrong about the series, but we needed to ask about the positives too, since there are both positives and negatives to everything. That's why for Tekken 4, we lost sight of what made Tekken good. That is profound, man. I really like that section. We have everything that, like, listening only to the haters and making Tekken 4. And it sells really well, but it has like low reviews and low audience. And then Tekken Tag 2, where it is developed by or heavily influenced by somebody who played the game on a hardcore level. And just unfortunately, it didn't pan out, right? It just wasn't geared towards regular players. And the arcades, I don't know how I didn't think about it, but I just didn't even consider the idea of tracking arcade sales like that. Like it totally makes sense to do. But it was just something that wasn't on my radar. I'm just a console gamer or like a PC gamer, you know? So, wow. It sounds like the Tekken series had its fair share of hardships. It's commonly said that you're never too young to fail, and so is it a good idea to experience failure when you're still at school? Rada says that would be best. We have access to more tools nowadays, so it's a good idea to try your hand at making something, even if it's small scale. People might hate it and you might feel down, but it's better to have these experiences. People who have more of these experiences will know how to overcome their failures. If you avoid the experience to begin with, you'll never learn. I think that being able to overcome disappointment is a skill that's applicable to the games industry as well. I see. You can fail regardless of how things are going, how well things are going. So it's important to know how to get over your failures. Can you give a message to potential creators to close off today's interview? Ikeda says, I started liking fighting games when I was about 12, and I'm now a game developer because I had laser focus on my goals. Stay true to what you love, and when it comes to game development, find your focus. So when someone asks what you want to do, you can give them a strong answer. I think that's true in general. In any career, like, having something you're super specialized in or you care about legitimately is better than being like a jack of all, master of none, you know? Rada says, I think the younger generations need to do differently from us. What I mean is when I talk to young people, I get told any advice I give them will not help them surpass the legacy my generation created. As AI and other technologies appear, I'm sure they'll make games completely differently from how we're doing it now. The game industry changes drastically whenever new technology is introduced, so I consider it important to have the flexibility to change how you think and not be married to one particular way of doing things. Thank you for the interesting stories. Wow. That was a really cool interview, especially at the end. I think this section here, where is this? I'm so bad at scroll. Let me zoom out now since you guys don't have to read it. Trial and error throughout the 30-year history of the Tekken series. This section is amazing. I feel like we are pretty lucky, I think, to have this much transparency into the developers, even though, again, I know everybody's unhappy with them right now, but I think this is amazing transparency. I think that we've seen a thread of people who get it, who kind of understand Tekken. And everybody loved to hate on the... I say everybody, you know. There was a lot of loud voices that loved to hate on Nakatsu right after Season 2 dropped, right? There was a lot of excitement to be hateful towards him. Because his name is on there as game director, right? But from this interview and from many changes throughout the patch history, you can tell that Nakatsu gets it. He gets Tekken. But I think that Tekken Tag 2 experience really shaped his mindset completely differently. He made a game for the hardcore players. He made a game that catered to skill expressive Tekken. And it bit them in the ass. It almost killed the series, right? So what a task to juggle. Especially because Nakatsu, people have said, like, why don't they put you, FDX, or why don't they put pros on the team? Nakatsu's kind of that guy. He's played the series. He's competitive. And based on small changes to the patch, the improved sidestep, again, the example he gave on Twitter, I talked about this in a previous video. I'll link it below. He gave an example on Twitter about sidestepping how the new sidestep should work for Season 2. Right? And the way he demonstrated this clip, I'll show you real quick. The way he demonstrated the sidestep here showed that he really understood how Tekken works, right? He blocks the Zafina low and sidesteps the second hit. This is extremely sweaty. This is not normal Tekken option usage, right? To see block the first hit of a string and then step to the foreground to get Zafina's back here. 99% of Tekken players are not doing this. I'm not doing this, right? Ikeda gets it. And it's clear that he is trying to juggle the different priorities. And they have the experience of Tekken 4, and they have the experience of Tekken Tag 2, and Tekken 7 as well. And I can only imagine how hard that is to juggle. So I'm really... I feel it was cool to read this and get all this insight. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope they continue to be communicative. I know the Tekken audience is brutal, man. Tekken audience is cruel and brutal and inhumane and disrespectful. And I feel that... Listen, I've been very vocally unhappy about Season 2. But I think to say that they don't care is crazy. It's definitely skill issues with delegating work to people who don't understand Tekken, you know? So I hope that they fix it. I hope it keeps going on. You can see in the gameplay, I got Lily dressed up as Cammy. I like Tekken so much. I've been trying to try other games, but nothing hits like Tekken. So I hope they figure it out. It might take a while, but, you know, I hope we get there. Hope you enjoyed this. Please leave a like and a comment if you did. Subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.